Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai.
Yeah.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O all-pervading person of Godhead.
Offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
Offer my respectful obeisances.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because He is the absolute truth.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
The primeval cause of all causes.
And the creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universes.
Of the creation, sustenance, destruction of the manifested universe.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
And He is independent because there is no other cause beyond Him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
It is the only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge into the heart of Brahma.
The original living being.
The original being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By Him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations.
Of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
Of water seen in fire or land seen in water.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Only because of Him do the material universes.
Temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature.
Temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes of nature.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
I therefore meditate upon Him, Lord Shri Krishna.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental
Which is
abode.
forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
Which is forever free from the illusory representation
I
of the
meditate
material
upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Him, for He is the absolute.
Dharma projita kaitra
Dharma prajita kaitavutra.
paramo nimatsaranam satam.
Paramo nirmasaranam.
Vedyam vastavam atra vastu.
Vedyam vastavam astra vastu.
Shivadam tapa trayon bulanam.
Shivadam tapatrayo mlanam.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite.
Kim Vapurir Ishwaraha.
Kim va paririshvara.
Sadyohridi avarudyate tra.
Sadyoruddhi avarudyatitra.
Krite bihi sususubhistakshanat.
Kritivhi shushubhis tatkanat.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are material
This
motivated.
Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare
Such
of
truth uproots the threefold
all.
miseries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity,
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity
is sufficient in itself for God realization.
is sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of
by
Bhagavatam,
this culture of knowledge,
by this culture of
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam,
Nigama kalpator galitam phalam,
sukhamukad amrita dravya samyutam,
Sukamakhat amrita drava sangitam,
pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam,
Pibata bhagavatam rasamayam,
ahur ahur raskabu vibhavakaha.
Mura hurasika bhuvivavuka.
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
The mature fruit of the desire to Vedic literatures.
The mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures.
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
Is emanating from the lips of Sri Shukadeva Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this food has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Shravantam Swakata Krishna.
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Hridyantaksto hi abadrani,
Vidyantastu Yabadrani.
Vidunoti Sritsatam.
Vidunoti Suritsatam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from Vedic
or
literatures,
to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from it directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
is itself righteous activity.
is itself a righteous
And
activity.
for one who hears about Krishna,
The one who hears about Krishna.
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's
acts as a best wishing friend,
heart. Acts as the best wishing friend.
and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
And purifies the devotees constantly engaged in hearing of him.
Nasta presu badresu
Nasta praishva bhadrishu.
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam bhagavata sevaya.
bhagavati tamasloke
Bhagavati uttamasloke.
bhaktir bhavati naistiki.
Bhakti bhavati nashti.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
And this way, the devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the
he
devotees,
becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajas tumo bhava
Tadarajastamo bhava
kamalobhadayaschaye
kamalobhadayascha
cheta itar anavidam
chitaitaranavidam
stitvam sattve prasidati.
stitam sarve prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion of ignorance,
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
and thus material lust and avarice are
Evam
diminished.
prasana manaso
Evam prasana manas
bhagavat bhakti yogataha
Bhagavat bhakti yogata
bhagavat tattva vijnanam
Bhagavat tattva vijnana
mukta sangasya chayate.
mukta sangasya jayate.
When these impurities are wiped away,
When its impurities are wiped
the
away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
candidates remain steady in his position of pure
becomes
goodness,
enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened with devotional service,
and understands the science of God perfectly.
and understand the signs of God perfectly.
Vidite hridaya grantis,
Vijate hridaya granthi,
chidyante sarva samsaya,
jyante samsasam,
siyante chasya karmani,
jyante sachakarmani,
Krishna evat manishvare.
Krista evan manishvari.
Thus bhakti yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
As a bhakti yoga service
and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
enable one to come at one to the stage of samsha samagram,
understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth Personality of Godhead.
understanding the supreme absolute true personality of God.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna, from his devotees in Krishna consciousness,
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Canto 2, Chapter 1, verse number 32 or 3. 33, yeah, okay. Nadyo sanadyo tatanu ruhani
Nadyo shanadyo tatano ruhani
mahi ruha vishwatanur nipendra
Mahiruavi swatano nripendra
anantavirya swasitam matarvishva
Anantavirya swasitam matavsva
gatir vaya karma guna pravaha.
Gatir vaya karma guna pravaha.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. O King, the rivers are the veins of the gigantic body, the trees are the hairs of his body, and the omnipotent air is his breath. The passing ages are his movements, and his activities are the reactions of the three modes of material nature. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The personality of Godhead is not a dead stone, nor is he inactive, as is poorly thought by some schools. He moves with the progress of time, and therefore he knows all about the past and future, along with his present activities. There is nothing unknown to him. The conditioned souls are driven by the reactions to the modes of material nature, which are the activities of the Lord. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 7.12, the modes of nature act under his direction only, and as such, no natural functions are blind or automatic. The power behind the activities is the supervision of the Lord, and thus the Lord is never inactive as is wrongly conceived. The Vedas say that the Supreme Lord has nothing to do personally, as is always the case with superiors, but everything is done by his direction. As it is said, not a blade of grass moves without his sanction. In the Brahma Samhita 5.48, it is said that all the universes and the heads of them, the Brahmas, exist only for the duration of his breathing period. The same is confirmed here. The air on which the universes and the planets within the universes exist is nothing but a bit of the breath of the unchangeable Virat Purusha. So even by studying the rivers, trees, air, and passing ages, one can conceive of the personality Godhead without being misled by the formless conception of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 12.5, it is stated that those who are much inclined to the formless conception of the Supreme Truth are more troubled than those who can intelligently conceive of the personal form. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this is more detailed information about the Virat Rupa, which is recommended to be meditated on by those who are too materialistically inclined and are maybe envious of hearing about the personal form of the Lord, or they are incredulous, not believing that it's possible that the Lord can appear as a baby, seemingly helpless, and then grow up to be a child, and to assume that in all these situations, baby, child, boyhood, adolescent, and manhood, and mature, and so forth, that the Lord is different than we are. But we have a material body, and Krishna has a spiritual body. And although he appears as a baby and a child, he retains all his absolute powers as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is impossible for people to even imagine, but it's a fact. And he is cognizant of everything, every nook and corner of the material creation, which are parts and parcels of his body, as Virat Rupa. He is conscious of them all. And nothing moves without his sanction. And he's active. So the philosophers that ascribe to Sankhya Yoga, they say even if there's God, all he does is create, and after that he retires. And then the laws of material nature take over. In other words, he's inactive. But that's not true. Krishna is always active because he's a person. And when it says the passing ages are his movements, and his activities are the reactions of the three modes of material nature. Now, he's not controlled by the three modes. He controls the three modes. And thus, the modes of material nature control the activities of the living entities. So, Prabhupada says that, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 7.12, Yechaiva Satvika Bhava Rajasas Tamasas Chaye Mataya Veti Tan Viti Natwahum Tesatemayi. Very nice verse. The modes of material nature act under his direction only, and as such, no natural functions are blind or automatic. That's a very important statement, because that means he's the supreme controller. Nothing moves without his sanction. And then it says the power behind the activities is the supervision of the Lord. And thus the Lord is never inactive, as is wrongly conceived, because he's conscious, just like you and I have consciousness. He has consciousness, but his consciousness is supreme. And whatever he thinks, that thing can happen under his control, and he's supplying the energy to do it. So the Vedas say that the Supreme Lord has nothing to do personally, as is always the case with superiors, but everything is done by his direction. As it is said, not a blade of grass moves without his sanction. Well, we should believe that. That's a fact. And because of the envy of material scientists and materialistic philosophers, they can't accept a fact like that, because if they accept that fact, that means that they should surrender to the Lord. And then also it said, one second, in the 3rd chapter, 22nd verse, it says, Nami partas dikartavyam trisu loke sukinchana nanavaptam avaptavyam varta eva karmani. O son of Prita, there is no work prescribed for me within all the 3 planetary systems, nor am I in want of anything, nor have I a need to obtain anything, and yet I am engaged in prescribed duties. Well, why is that? He says in the next verse, Yadihi aham navarteyam jatu karman atandrita mamavart manavartan te manusya partasarvasaha. For if I ever failed to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, O Partha, certainly all men would follow my path. So Krishna is not obliged to do anything, but yet, because he's the maintainer of Dharma, and he's the giver of Dharma, he says, if I ever failed to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, certainly all men would follow my path. And Prabhupada explains in the purport, in order to keep the balance of social tranquility for progress in spiritual life, there are traditional family usages meant for every civilized man. Although such rules and regulations are for the conditioned souls and not Lord Krishna, because he descended to establish the principles of religion, he followed the prescribed rules. Otherwise, common men would follow in his footsteps, because, in other words, if he did not follow, then the people would copy that. Because otherwise, common men would follow in his footsteps, because he is the greatest authority. From the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is understood that Lord Krishna was performing all the religious activities at home and out of home as required of a householder. And then he says, if I did not perform such prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put to ruination. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. So, Prabhupada writes in the purport to that Varna Shankara is unwanted population which disturbs the peace of the general society. Well, that's what we have today. We have a large number of children that were born, and the parents are not really pleased to have those children. So they don't take the time to properly educate the kids, and the kids grow up to be a nuisance in society, creating havoc. And this is in all races and all ethnicities and all religions and so forth. This disregard of the parents to properly educate their children, and then just in a sense, because they didn't even want those children, they couldn't stop their sexual activity, and even though they use contraception, this thing and that thing, and abortion, still children are being born that are not wanted, and therefore the parents don't take the responsibility to educate them. So Varna Shankara is unwanted population which disturbs the peace of the general society. In order to check this social disturbance, there are prescribed rules and regulations by which the population can automatically become peaceful and organized for spiritual progress in life. When Lord Krishna descends, naturally he deals with such rules and regulations in order to maintain the prestige and necessity of such important performances. The Lord is neither the father of all living entities. The Lord is the father of all living entities, and if the living entities are misguided, indirectly the responsibility goes to the Lord. Therefore, whenever there is general disregard of regulative principles, the Lord himself descends and corrects the society. We should, however, note carefully that although we have to follow in the footsteps of the Lord, we still have to remember that we cannot imitate him. Following and imitating are not on the same level. We cannot imitate the Lord by lifting Govardhan Hill, as the Lord did in his childhood. It is imperative for any human being. It is impossible for any human being. So in other words, we cannot imitate the Lord by lifting Govardhan Hill as the Lord did in his childhood. It is impossible for any human being. We have to follow his instructions, but we may not imitate him at any time. So this following or imitating, there's a big difference. Anusara and anukara. Anusara means following the example of the Lord when he's acting as a grihasta in Dwarka. But anukara is trying to imitate the Lord when he lifts Govardhan Hill or dances with the gopis. So we should never try and imitate the Lord, but follow the principles that the Lord represents as an ideal grihasta. That difference should be understood. And whenever a person tries to imitate the Lord, like for example, one pathetic example of that is the so-called Asat Guru. Now, he publicly claims that he's drinking poison because he considers himself Shiva. And he says often the Shivoham, I am Shiva, right? And so what did Lord Shiva do? He drank an ocean of poison. And what does the Asat, so-called Guru, do? He claims that he's drinking a little bit of poison. Of course, if he wants to be Shivoham, he should drink an ocean of poison, right? That he cannot do. And that means he's not Shiva. He's a pathetic excuse for a human being. And unless we understand and see through the sophistry of these so-called incarnations, whether they claim to be incarnation of Krishna or incarnation of Shiva, they're the incarnation, so-called incarnation, without the power of Krishna or Shiva. So that means they're nothing. They're just rascals. But because people are ignorant and they like cheap entertainment, so they feel fascinated by his what you would call disgusting antics. You know, it's all cheap antics. Just like there was a preacher in Oakland, California. His name was Jim Jones. Well, Jimmy Boy, he used to cure cancer. So someone would come with cancer, right? So he would say, is there anybody who has cancer in the audience? So he had one person planted in the audience. They came up, yes, I have cancer in the throat. And then he would say some phony prayer and put his hands on the person. And all of a sudden he pulled something out that looked like from his mouth. It was the gizzard of a chicken that he got from some butcher. It had blood on it. You know, he'd pull it out and show it to everyone. And the man said, oh, it's cured, you saved my life. You know, the whole thing was theatrical, it was set up, it was phony, but yet people believed it. And they'd see the the bloody gizzard of a chicken. And they say, oh, he took the cancer out, right? And then Jim Jones later on, because he was being pursued by the income tax people and so forth, he took his whole community from Oakland, California, which is made up of white people and black people, to South America, to Guyana, and he set up an ashram there. And then some congressmen from the United States went to see what was happening there, because they heard there was a lot of mistreatment of the people. They were all American citizens, right? And then Jim Jones then ordered his people to take cyanide. So he organized a massive suicide. And everyone, the parents, the kids, everyone. Some people were smart enough to run away, hide in the jungle, but most everybody drank a little bit of cyanide. They all died, and Jim Jones also, which was good for Jim Jones to die. But it was a tragedy that these other people followed him, thinking they were all going to go back to some kind of heaven with him. So people get so bewildered by nonsense, it's ridiculous. And so it all starts by being attracted by these tricks, by these little magical tricks, just like, one of the Sai Babas, he pulls out a gold bracelet, right? But he always wears these very baggy, drooping clothes, so he has things in his sleeve, right? He's not creating these things out of nothing. One time I had a shop in France, and one time this African lady came in, she dressed in her traditional dress with this big, she was a big lady, and she had these big sleeved clothes on, and the sleeves were very big like that, right? So she was looking around the store, and she was going to places where I couldn't see from the cash register, right? And spending a long time there, So finally she came and she said, "Oh, I was looking for this thing, you didn't have it, so I'll just go." So as she started walking toward the door, I ran to the door and closed the door. I said, I got to make sure you didn't steal anything." She said, "What do you mean steal? I didn't steal anything." She got really upset. I said, "What do you have in your sleeve there?" Because it's a big droopy sleeve like this, and it seemed like it was something was weighing it down. So I don't have anything in my sleeve, And I said, "I'm going to put my hand in it." So "You're not allowed to put your hand in my sleeve." I said, "I'm going to do it because I think you stole." And I stick my hand in there, right? And I'm pulling out one thing after another that she stole. So the so-called Baba, he was like that. He had one of his clothes on with these big sleeves, right? And he would pull out different things from the sleeve, and people think, "Oh, he did it, he did it very quickly. It's a sleight of hand." And people think, "Oh, he created this gold necklace for me," or whatever. So, these tricksters, and that's all they are, these cheap tricksters, like the so-called Asad Baba and this one and that one. All they do is cheat people with tricks. And they claim that they're God, And people who are ignorant, they fall for it because they don't know anything. Just like, here's a description of Krishna's Virat Rupa. Now, if anyone claims to be God, they should be able to show you their Virat Rupa, just like Krishna showed it to Arjuna. But no, they won't do that. But they do these little cheap tricks, and people are so stupid that they fall for it. And so this is very sad. So Krishna says then, continuing the third chapter here, Bhagavad Gita, as the ignorant perform their duties with attachments to the results, the learned may similarly act, but without attachment, for the sake of leading the people on the right path. This is a really nice verse. Verse 25, third chapter, verse 25. And Prabhupada says in a purport, a person in Krishna consciousness and a person not in Krishna consciousness are differentiated by different desires. A Krishna conscious person does not do anything which is not conducive to development of Krishna consciousness. He may even act exactly like the ignorant person who is too much attached to material activities, but one is engaged in such activities for the satisfaction of his sense gratification, whereas the other is engaged for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, the Krishna conscious person is required to show the people how to act and how to engage the results of action for the purpose of Krishna consciousness. Now, this is a very important verse. It means that two people have a job, the same job. Let's say it's collecting trash. So you see these guys with these big trucks, and they come early in the morning, and there's one guy in the back of the truck holding on, and one guy's driving. So the driver stops, and the guy from the back jumps out and goes to the trash cans that the people leave out, right, and loads them on so that they can be emptied into the truck, right, and then he has to put them back. And he's always running, and the guy who's driving, he's never running. He's just making sure that when those trash cans are emptied into the truck, then the truck crushes it and compacts it. So let's say sometimes there are two runners. Sometimes there are two runners. So one is a devotee and one is not a devotee. So they're doing exactly the same work together, right? So you can't tell any difference from the point of view of the work. But the purpose of the work is different. One is doing it for Krishna and the other is doing it for sense gratification. Therefore it says, therefore the Krishna conscious person is required to show the people how to act and how to engage the results of action, meaning the money or whatever, for the purpose of Krishna consciousness. So this is the duty of the devotees. They're also working. They're also working in IT, or they're working here or working there. But what do they do with the result of the work? And what is their main focus in life? Their focus is to please Guru and Krishna. And therefore they'll use a significant part of their income to support those activities. Whereas the other person, they use all their money for nonsense, just like, they'll buy beer and they'll buy liquor and wine and marijuana. The marijuana shops are doing very good in Washington State. Big business. Right? A lot of people are buying marijuana. It just shows how stupid people are and degraded. So that we have to show the right example. But then Krishna says, text 26, so as not to disturb the minds of the ignorant men attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. So a good example of this is washing the pots and dishes in the temple. Now, there should always be initiated devotees doing that. And they should engage non-initiated people who want to volunteer to also do it. But if there's only non-initiated people doing it all the time, and initiated devotees avoid doing that because they think it's too low for them to do because they're brahmanas or they're this or they're that, that's a big mistake. Because the whole purpose of doing activities in a temple is, first of all, it's equal whether you're washing Krishna's dishes or whether you're dressing Krishna. The service is equal. It's not that one is better than the other. That all those things are sahajiya or caste brahmana false ideas. But the real idea is to engage others, and you engage them by showing the example. But if you say, "Oh, I'm a brahmana, I'm not going to do that because that's too low," that means the person who thinks like that is a nonsense. even though they're a Brahmana, even though they think they're advanced. They're not advanced. Advanced means you do whatever is necessary to train other people and give them a chance. So here it says, so not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties. A learned person should not induce them to stop work. So they shouldn't say, well, you know, I'm more advanced than you, so I don't wash the dishes in the temple, you know, or mop the floor, because that's for the Sudras, like you. You're just a new guy, so you can be a Sudra. You're a Sudra, so you should wash the dishes. Well, they might not say that to someone, but they show that by not being there. And then people catch on after a little while. They say, oh, yeah, you know, it's the uninitiated people that have to do all this work, but the initiated people, they don't do any of that work because they're too advanced. See, that's an extremely bad example to show in the temple. Extremely bad example. So therefore, we should never induce people to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, the devotee should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. So then, in the purport, Prabhupada says, Vedaischa sarvir aham eva vedya. That is the end of all Vedic rituals, all performances of sacrifices, and everything that is put into the Vedas, including all direction for material activities, are meant for understanding Krishna, who is the ultimate goal of life. But because the conditioned souls do not know anything beyond sense gratification, they study the Vedas to that end. Yeah. They study the Vedas in order to improve their sense gratification. But through fruitive activities and sense gratification regulated by the Vedic rituals, one is gradually elevated to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, a realized soul in Krishna consciousness should not disturb others in their activities of understanding, but he should act by showing how the results of all work can be dedicated to the service of Krishna. That's the point. They should give an example of washing dishes and chanting Hare Krishna while you're doing it and speaking to the people that are helping you about Krishna and inspiring them to be a devotee, you see. And they'll say, and this is why, I don't know if you've ever heard of Jayananda. Whenever there's a Rath Yatra festival, his picture has to be on the Rath card. Why? Because he was a devotee that did this exactly. He was a very highly advanced devotee that did what you would call mundane labor. And he would engage people. And he made many, many devotees by his example, because he was with the new devotees all the time, sitting with them and working with them, you know, side by side. And he trained a lot of people in Krishna consciousness, and Prabhupada very much appreciated him. He would always say, "Where's Jayananda?" They said, "Oh, well, Prabhupada, he's taking the trash out right now." Oh. Or where is Jayananda? Oh, Prabhupada, you know, after he finishes doing all the cleanup, he drives a taxi so he can pay the rent of the temple. That's what he was doing. He would stay up all night driving a taxi and be there Mangal Arti, right? And he'd be doing all kinds of service that nobody else wanted to do. And also, he built the first Rath Yatra cart, you know, which was a miracle for Prabhupada. And every year he made sure the Rath Yatra happened with beautiful carts. See? So he was a real devotee. And also, he got leukemia. It's a blood disease, cancer. And he also inherited a lot of money. Some of his relatives died and left him a lot of money. And he gave the whole amount to Prabhupada. It was a check, like $70,000. And Prabhupada looked at the check, and he sent it back to him. He said, "You should use this money to heal yourself." You know what he did? He sent it back to Prabhupada and said, "Prabhupada, I think you can use it better than me." That's who he was. He was one of the, and he's the, you can say in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, he was the first devotee who attained sainthood. I remember when I first went to San Francisco as the temple president at GBC, on the first Rath Yatra that I experienced, we had to build the Rath. They would disassemble the Rath Yatra cart and then rebuild it again the next year. So when we were building it in the Golden Gate Park, where there was some place where you could, we'd take all the parts and then we'd build it there. It was quite an endeavor. While we were building it, this one person who was riding a bicycle stopped and he said, "Where's Jayananda?" And we looked at him, and someone said, "Well, you know, he's not here. He left his body. He died." I said, "What? He died?" He said, "He was a saint. I never met a person like that before." Now, this is just an ordinary guy, right? But he had met Jayananda building the Rath cart in that same place, and he was expecting to see him. And when he was told that he died, he started glorifying him like anything. That's who he was, right? He was a person who knew how to preach and make devotees by giving an example himself. See? That's what we should all do. That's our duty in life, is to train people and engage them and not look down on people because we think we're so advanced and they're just some neophyte that they should do menial work because, you know, that's below me. No. We should all be extremely humble and inspire people by giving association and engaging them in Krishna consciousness. So finally, Prabhupada says, therefore, a realized soul in Krishna consciousness should not disturb others in their activities or understanding, but he should act by showing how the results of all work can be dedicated to the service of Krishna. The learned Krishna conscious person may act in such a way that the ignorant person working for sense gratification may learn how to act and how to behave. Although the ignorant man is not to be disturbed in his activities, a slightly developed Krishna conscious person may directly be engaged in the service of the Lord without waiting for other Vedic formulas. For this fortunate man, there is no need to follow the Vedic rituals, because by direct Krishna consciousness, one can have all the results one would otherwise derive by following one's prescribed duties. So this is how Prabhupada built the movement up. He directly engaged devotees in Krishna conscious activity, which is activity from 4 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. And the activity is chanting, attending Arati, Tulsi Arati, Mangal Arati, and hearing lectures. And he said morning, afternoon, and evening, and going on Sankirtan and distributing books and cooking for the deities and cleaning. Cleaning is just as important as cooking, right? The people who, you know, use pots and don't clean them, that's nonsense. Prabhupada insisted that whoever uses a pot has to clean it also. It's not that somebody cleans and other people get things dirty. See, anyone who, you know, is working in the kitchen, they have to be very careful because the kitchen is as holy as the altar. Because that's where you're cooking things that go on the altar and are offered to Krishna. So people who are selfishly doing things and thinking themselves so advanced, that is nonsense. That's not Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness means that the more you advance, the more humble you become. Not the more you advance, the more exalted you are, and everyone has to recognize that. No, that exalted position is humility and unmotivated service. In other words, the only motivation is pleasing Krishna, one that does not have a personal motive, right? So, for the fortunate man, there is no need to follow the Vedic rituals, because by direct Krishna consciousness, one can have all the results one would otherwise derive from following one's prescribed duties. So, therefore, our duties are given by Prabhupada. You have to wake up early, this thing, that thing. Always be active, never any nonsense during the day, and always very attentive to training other people or engaging other people in Krishna's service. Just like yesterday at the farm, this man with his family came. By the way, you didn't call him. I gave you his number. Huh? You did? He said he didn't get any message. Anyway, he came yesterday, and this is the second time he came with his family. This time he brought all his kids. And the first time he came, I gave him 2 goodness cookies. So I asked the kids, I said, did you like the cookies? He said, wow. He said, they were great. You know, he had a bigger boy and a little boy. He said, they were great. They were really good. So I gave him 2 more cookies. And I asked the man, I said, no, he asked me. He said, nobody contacted me. I said, really? So I gave him your phone number this time. Right? I said, you can call him. And they were really enthusiastic. I mean, they're so happy to meet people that are doing things that they appreciate, like the cows and the farm. And he just finished his Discover Yourself course. He just finished it, you know. And he and his wife and his kids now are waiting to go further into Krishna consciousness. So these are things we have to be aware of. We have to be very, very, very conscious of training people by giving them our association. We should not be above doing even the most menial services in the temple. It's not. We do not have a class conscious movement. We're all servants. When we receive the name Das, that identifies who we are. Right? We are a servant, and if we think we're above doing certain services, we are nonsense. There's no service that is, let's say, unworthy of being done. Any service, any little service in the temple should be done with enthusiasm because it's all for the pleasure of Krishna. Everything in the temple is holy. There's nothing, no part of the temple is not holy. Even the toilet is holy because it's part of the temple and it's part of the activity-oriented devotees to make it a little easier for them to do their activities. So you have a toilet inside the temple, right? Normally it's not inside the temple, it should be outside. But anyway, we're living in a certain area that's the norm. So we have to see every part of the temple and every activity in the temple as devotional service, and they're equal because the result is always offered to Krishna. Unless we have this consciousness, we will not be effective preachers. Now see, the problem is, because someone is a grihastas don't have a lot of opportunities to preach because they're active all day long just trying to maintain. So if you come to the temple, you should realize, especially if one is a grihasta, that you have many possibilities of preaching in the temple. You don't have to go out and find the people. They're coming here. So we should always attach ourselves to someone to cultivate them. See? So if I bought that farm in the city, in a city, it's because of that purpose, because I knew that many people would come. Because to see a cow, they have to drive sometimes a half an hour, 1 hour, or 2 hours to see a cow. Now they drive 10 minutes and they see a cow, right? And Indians like cows, right? So they'll come. So that was my idea. But the idea is when they come, just like when they come into the temple, we have a chance to give our association. See? If we don't understand that, that means we've missed something really big. And our duty is to help other people become Krishna conscious by giving them our association. Okay, we'll stop right there and continue again tomorrow. I didn't cover what I was going to do today, which was to compare the gopis' transcendental emotions with those of the wives of Krishna and Dwarka, but we'll do that tomorrow. Are there any questions? I know there's one family where previously the husband and wife would come and wash the dishes. And then for some reason or other, they stopped doing that. Right? And because of that, their relationship has deteriorated seriously. But when they were coming to the temple to wash the dishes together with other devotees at that time, they're not initiated, but they were becoming Krishna conscious. They were united because they're serving Krishna together. That's the way grihasthas should be. Right? But when they stop doing that, now their relationship is getting ruined. Right? So washing dishes is a glorious, because there's Krishna's dishes. It's a glorious thing, and we should be ready to do any service for the Lord because it's all on an equal level. There's no such thing. This is below me. It's not. There's nothing like that. But if you think like that, then it's called kanista adhikari. They only think that service to the deities is service. Anything else is not service. They are called kanistas. And I'm going to talk about that tomorrow also, because it's a big subject in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Who is a kanista, who is a madhyama, who is uttama adhikari. Haribol. All glories to Prabhupada.